Today's guest sold his business for $1 billion. With just $10,000 and a protein bar recipe, he co-founded Quest Nutrition, transforming it into the fastest growing company in the food industry.
The great irony of my life is once I stopped thinking about getting money and I started thinking about adding value to people's lives, I made a ton of money.
Growing up in a household filled with poverty, alcoholism, and obesity, he made himself a promise to escape.
I became obsessed that I was going to be rich. No one's ever going to control what I do ever again.
Today, he's building Impact Theory, a media powerhouse on a mission to dethrone Disney, challenge social programming, and use storytelling to unlock human potential.
It's entirely possible what we're doing is a terrible idea, but this is the path that we're walking. So we're trying to build this really gigantic game. On a long enough timeline, in success, we will build Ready Player One.
In this episode, we'll explore how anyone can build a billion-dollar brand, reveal the impact of AI on how we create and consume media, and discuss his unfiltered views on dating, marriage, and personal accountability as a man.
I am so glad the stock market exists. I love that we're able to gamble, but it is gambling with a cover story. And the cover story is that
Tom Bilyeu. Welcome to the Jack Neel Podcast.
Thanks for having me, man. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, for sure. I think a good place to start here, and it's been a while since you sold your company, but you sold a protein bar for $1 billion.
Yeah, all true. So I'll give you the speed run, and then if there's anything that you want to push on, just let me know. But we were running a software company, and I had told my wife at any point, if I'm creating problems in our marriage, let me know. And she pulled me aside and she said, look, you're now damaging the marriage. So you're so unhappy at your job, something's got to change. And so I went in and quit, and I gave the guys the equity back. I was like, it was worth about $2 million. And I said, I'm not going to cross the finish line. I don't want anything for this. I'm going to move. This is real. I'm going to move to a town in Greece somewhere because my wife is Greek, and I'm going to write the great American screenplay. And that I'm going to go do something that makes me feel alive. And they were like, hold on, wait a second. We actually feel the same. We're not happy either. So what would it need to look like for the three of us to continue to work together? And so for three very different reasons, we end up settling on health and nutrition. And one of my partners had been making protein bars. His wife had been making protein bars at home. And the tech guys in our company were like, oh, can we get some more of those? So we're like, okay, there's something there. And we decide that's going to be the flagship product. We're going to start with protein bars, but we're going to have a mission to end metabolic disease. So we very quickly realized that the bar that we want to make, quote unquote, can't be made. And this ends up being one of the big breakthroughs for us, was recognizing that it didn't violate the laws of physics. It was just that because of corn subsidies, believe it or not, all the equipment that would allow you to manufacture a bar at scale assumed you were going to have high fructose corn syrup. And so as soon as you take that out, the bar really does become unmakeable on that equipment. And so we decided we're going to become our own manufacturers right at the same time that, because I was fed up with not feeling alive, I start doing all the things now that we would say is like the standard marketing playbook, using social media, which wasn't even called that back then, but telling our own story, building up a content house, engine in-house for a protein bar company, which people were like, what are you guys doing? And focused on community, focused on what we would now call influencer marketing. But again, like none of this stuff was like a known thing back then. And the timing of people waking up to the fact that sugar was the problem, it just all came together all at once, right as we're doing all of this, not because we're super geniuses, but because we were fed up with chasing money and doing like the typical thing. And so we were now really leading with something we believed in. And the great irony of my life is once I stopped thinking about getting money and I started thinking about adding value to people's lives, I made a ton of money. And so it ended up just being this insane rocket ship where we were growing truly exponentially, meaning we were doubling month over month. And we did that for like 3 years. So when you carry that out, like all of a sudden you're like, wait, are we really going to go from 500,000 in revenue to $1 million in revenue next month? And then are we really going to go from $1 million in revenue to $2 million in revenue? And then the crazy one, we just did 100 million in revenue. Are we really going to do 200 million in revenue next month? I mean, it was insane. So yeah, that is the speed run of the experience. But if there's anything that you want to get into the nitty gritty, just let me know.
Yeah, so you left Quest, or kind of cashed out on some equity in 2016, is that right?
Yeah, so there were two beats. So in 2016, we had taken money in 2014, I think. And then in 2016, I left to found Impact Theory, which was the whole reason I got into business in the first place. So the guys that ended up being my partners had seen me as a struggling filmmaker and were like, you're coming to the world with your hand out. And if you want to control the art, you got to control the resources. So you should get into business and get rich. And they're like, we need a copywriter. So if you want to be a copywriter, come join us. And then they made a tremendous offer to me and countless other people. We look for partners, we settle for employees. And so if you can come in and add enough value, you can really become an owner in this company. And I was the one that took them seriously and just went ham, trying to become as valuable as I could to the company. They made me an owner, but that's when I went in and quit, and the story picks up where we were. But yeah, so that was the first bite. And ironically, I actually made less money in 2014 than I did in 2019. But 2014 was when it really changed my life. And then 2019 was when we sold the company all the way.
It's interesting what you said about kind of gathering resources to have full control over the media empire you were trying to build. It's something similar to what I did, not nearly to the same extent, but I went to film school at UT Austin, and I kind of realized quickly through a mentor, he was like, Jack, it'd be way easier if you just made some money and then just tried to produce your own film. And you can just post a movie on YouTube. And if you post a movie on YouTube and it's good, it will get views, you know? He kind of related back to Arnold Schwarzenegger being like a real estate mogul before getting into film. I thought that was interesting. But on Quest, so at the time you left, what kind of ancillary products did you offer? Was it just the protein bar, or was there chips?
When I left, we had protein powder, we had chips, we had the hero bars. There was probably 7 or 8 different product lines. We were working on the pizza. Yeah, there was a bunch of stuff. To be honest, I don't even remember which things had already made market. We had the whole keto line, which I think they've ended up just completely shuttering. But yeah, we had a ton of different products. But when you looked at the revenue, it was still the vast majority was the bar.
Really? Okay. So what was your impact on Quest? Like, what was the thing that you were best at? What was the thing that you kind of left your mark? Was it ideas for some of the products, flavors, that kind of thing?
We broke it down into, and this is true of any business, there's people, product, and process. And I was people. So I was sales, marketing, company culture, that kind of stuff.
Got it. And then with the social media, was your personal brand attached to Quest?
Not yet. So at the very beginning, there was no sense of a personal brand. I certainly wasn't thinking of it like that. I just wanted to tell people stories. And so what it became was what we called mirror marketing. So we used to joke that the first rule of Quest marketing is we never talk about Quest. And we wanted to show back, it's what we would call UGC now. But back then we were like, we want to show them back to them. We want to celebrate their wins. So if somebody had a big physical transformation, they added a bunch of muscle or they lost a bunch of fat, we would show that. So people would submit like crazy, like, look at what I've done using your product. It's incredible. Or we had a whole show with Cassie Ho, has continued to go on to absolutely blow up. She was already big back then. And we did a show called Cooking Clean with Quest, where we would say, okay, what's like a crazy dessert that you wish was high in protein instead of high in sugar? And so people then started submitting recipes like crazy. We did a whole recipe book with Quest. And so that was just like a totally different approach back then, seemed very counterintuitive, but ended up being really a cool thing to see them as a community come together and have their own ethos. And it wasn't, because in the beginning, we really started with like bodybuilders. That was like our core influencer. That was a person we went after and became something completely different, and really found that mass appeal as people really took to this idea of we're making junk food healthy. So rather than trying to make broccoli taste good, we wanted to make the cookies and cakes and pies good for you. And flipping it like that got people really excited.
What was the scrappiest marketing method you used to scale the company to $1 billion?
This is all going to sound so boring now because it is what everybody does, but going out to influencers and saying, we knew that people would go to a pool party and see somebody that was ripped and be like, what do you eat? And so our mission was to make sure all of those people were like, oh, I eat Quest. And so, I remember I got to meet Chris Angel, the magician. because he was really he's known for being in good shape all the time. And he was like, it just gets so boring the way that you have to eat. And he was like, Tom, like these things taste so good. I eat so many of them. He's like, you just got to be honest with me. Is it really what it says it is? We're like, yeah, man, for real. Like you can take your blood readings and report back. And so doing that, getting it into the hands of people who are walking billboards because of how they looked, for better or worse, humans are obsessed with their own body. They're obsessed with the bodies of others. And so getting people to say, yo, I eat Quest. So again, this is so standard now, but like I remember one time driving there was this doctor who was in really good shape and he was starting to have a presence online. I literally drove to his house to hand deliver the bars to be like, look, if you love him or hate him, say it. Whatever you think is true, just talk to people, try these out and say what you think. And that was our message to everybody. We don't have a specific message. We don't have a number of times you need to post about it. We're going to give you product. And our only request is that you be honest. And so we knew we had something that actually worked. So it's pretty easy. Now there's a lot of people that had mimicked what Quest did, but at the time, dude, it was the only bar that didn't have sugar, but tasted like it did. So people just went crazy. So you could tell people, say whatever you think is true, not try to steer them in any direction, and they would just go crazy.
I was curious of this. I hadn't seen much about it, but I know Jimmy, Mr. Beast, dropped Feastables, and it seems like a somewhat similar concept, like a healthier version of a protein bar, a healthier version of a chocolate bar. And he reached out to a lot of people in the chocolate industry specifically to kind of get ahead. And some of the marketing tactics that you're talking about sound similar to what he's doing now. Did he have any contact with you or reach out to you for...
So his manager at one point reached out to me. I didn't connect with him at that point. I've since connected with him on a very loose level on just YouTube in general. But what Mr. Beast has done, honestly, is staggering. So if I were to do it over now, following that playbook where you build a gigantic audience and then bring a product to market, which we did the exact opposite because of that moment in time. So I always tell people, I could literally give you a day-by-day playbook for exactly what we did to blow Quest up. And if you follow it, it won't work. It worked because at that time, nobody was doing it. And so it was so novel and so exciting. And an influencer could have a pretty big following, and just giving them a couple boxes of Quest every month, they would talk about it all the time because it gave them a relationship with a brand, which at the time was super novel. And especially people in that industry, it was so exciting for them to be like, yo, I'm working with Quest and I'm a sponsored athlete, not knowing for the public, not knowing the sponsorship was 2 boxes of bars a month. But it made them feel good. It gave us a huge brand halo. Now, Mr. Beast, just his brilliance as a content creator cannot be overstated. I mean, it's really pretty breathtaking. I get that people have beef with the Mr. Beastification of YouTube and all that and whatever, but I'm very impressed with him as a content creator. So the way I look at him is somebody that said, I'm a fastball down the middle. So literally when my mom visits, she and I will sit down and watch Mr. Beast videos. We both love them. So you've got a guy in his 40s, you've got a woman in her mid 70s, and you've got kids that can all watch Mr. Beast. And so I like to think, though I never had this conversation with him, but I like to think he said to himself, okay, I'm a fastball down the middle as a content creator. What is the product equivalent of a fastball down the middle? That's consumable. And consumables, you're going to make so much more money because you're giving people a product that they actually eat and they're going to come back. And it's hamburgers and French fries when you're thinking about an American audience. And so Beast Burger, which I know is defunct now, but it was a brilliant move when he did it. And then a chocolate bar. And so I think that's really, really smart.
Yeah, I'm glad to hear that answer from you. I asked the CEO of 7-Eleven, who was connected with Jimmy as well, the old CEO, Jim Keys. And I was like, why do you think Mr. Beast did a chocolate bar specifically? And he just said, maybe he likes chocolate. And I was like, that's honestly a good answer as well, you know, but also knowing him, it's probably the highest leverage thing given that audience. With that, what CPG product would you release today?
I would be looking at what do I think would speak to my audience. So this is where before I took the approach of, okay, I want to end metabolic disease. I care about that because I grew up in a morbidly obese family. And so I'll be able to show up on a Friday night at 2 a.m., true story. And when my knuckles are bloody from repairing one of the pieces of equipment while all my friends are out at the club, the thing I will remind myself is that I'm here for my mom and my sister. And so that was really a deep connection. Now we're in a moment where it's in many ways the reverse. You get the audience first, and then you figure out what product aligns with the audience that I've built. So for me, I'm not focused on CPG. I'll give you an answer to what product I would do, but honestly, I wouldn't do a CPG product. So I'm building a game product, a video game. So to me, I've always been trying to get into the media side of things. So I'm trying to build an audience that resonates with media in general. If I were going to do a consumable, then I would ask myself what lines up with my audience. So my audience is a little bit older. My audience is more educated. My audience has more disposable income. So I'd be looking for something that would match them. So not having spent any time thinking about this, I would do something in the food space that was a little more, it would be tied back to health because I have so much DNA there from a credibility standpoint. Probably wouldn't be a protein bar just because there'd be so much similarities there, but something like that, a healthy upscale snack food that's good for you that parents want to give to their kids. That would be a big thing for me because I'm so trying to attach my brand to being something parents can trust with their kids, hence the gaming, the comic books, that kind of stuff. But what that actual product would be, I'd have to really sit down and map it out, but it would follow those general guidelines.
It's interesting. Yeah, I think Chris Williamson and Stephen Bartlett from Diary of a CEO, I think they both are heavily involved with like nootropic type drinks, something like that. And they have somewhat similar brands to you, I would say. So that kind of makes sense. But my issue with it, I would say, is like learning more about advertising and marketing. And I've realized how big congruency is. Like whatever content you're making has to be the problem, and the product is kind of the solution to that content. So why is what you're building now kind of the highest leverage thing that goes with that congruency?
Well, I'll tell you why it's the most congruent, whether it ends up being the highest leverage or not. I feel like I'm taking a huge risk that I think outcomes are very uncertain, knowing how difficult it is to get into the gaming industry, especially the kind of game that I'm trying to build. But in terms of, I've already made money, so I'm certainly not money motivated at this point. What I'm motivated by is the following analogy. So Peter Attia, I don't know if you know him, absolute brilliant thinker when it comes to health. And he was an oncologist. And he gave this incredible example. And he said, fighting cancer felt like I'm standing at the bottom of a waterfall and there's all these bodies falling off the waterfall. And my job is to go in and grab these people and pull them out and try to save them. And he's like, you just realize very quickly, you can't save them all. There's just so many people coming off. And he was like, you finally say to yourself, who's throwing people in the water upstream? Why don't I go upstream and stop whoever that is from throwing people into the river? And so back at Quest, I started something called Quest University. And my goal was, this is long before cameras on me. I wasn't even thinking about that. And I told all my employees who grew up in the hood, when you get into manufacturing in Southern California, you're going to be in the worst neighborhoods in America. And so we were literally just outside of Compton. I'll often round it to Compton, but we were employing people from that area. So you can imagine former drug dealers, gangbangers. We had Bloods and Crips working on the same line. We put out the word on the street that we would consider somebody for employment, even if they had a felony conviction. So we had people lined up around the building just to be interviewed. It was crazy. It was unbelievable. It was amazing. Long, complicated story because I don't do it anymore. There's a reason. But it was really incredible. And I said, I will come in early and I will stay late. I will teach you anything you want to know about entrepreneurship. I'll teach you how to build a competitive nutrition company if that's what you want, because I want you to walk away from your experience with me saying you care more about my future than my own mother. And I really poured myself into that. And what I found was 2% of people do something, changes their life forever. We have people go on to start companies. I'll get text updates from them. It's incredible. But 98% did nothing. And that was really disheartening. So that was me at the bottom of the waterfall going, how is it possible that people, some of whom are clearly smarter than me, meaning they can process raw data faster than I can. So they're smarter than me, but they're running a software application in their mind that's so nonsensical that they're in gangs and they're selling drugs and it's just going nowhere fast. And I'm not able to update their software. So I was like, I want to go upstream and get to people before they're running the bad software. Now, I can't be everybody's parent, which would be ideal. You get them right at birth. Obviously, that doesn't scale. I can't control who your parents are. I can't control where you grow up. I can't control who your friends are, but I can control what your friends think is cool. And so can I go upstream and create entertainment that has empowering ideas at its core? to understand me and all the content that I create, all of it has empowerment at the core. So if I'm talking about politics, it's because it matters. And if you get that right, you create the soil in which you can create a tremendous country. I often make that mistake, so Freudian. A country as amazing as America. And if you get it wrong, then you lead to hardship for everybody in the country. So if I'm talking about pure mindset stuff or business, I'm really trying to give people ideas that have real world utility. Now, when you talk to kids, you're not going to be able to say, think like this, act like this. Instead, you're going to do things like give them a character like Yoda. Yoda actually changed my real life. So Yoda introduced me to ideas at the time I couldn't have told you were Taoist and Buddhist, but that's exactly what George Lucas was doing. So he had learned all this Eastern philosophy. He puts it into the mouth of this little green character. I hear said little green character when I'm like 10 or 11, and they're just like, oh, these are really cool ideas. Do or do not. There is no try. Then my friend gives me a book when I'm 15 or whatever called the Tao Te Ching. And I'm reading it and I'm like, yo, this sounds like Yoda. And so now I had this instant connection to the actual source material that this guy was speaking on. So at Impact Theory with our video game, Project Kayzen, our first partnership was with Bruce Lee, because Bruce Lee also had a big impact on my life with his whole idea of the Tao of Jeet Kune Do, which is basically learn from anybody. Most of what they say isn't going to make any sense. Discard what doesn't work. Keep what does work. And so he was MMA before there was MMA. He didn't want to be confined by Kung Fu or Judo or karate. He wanted to say in a street fight, some things work, some things don't. And so I got obsessed with that. So now I've got a video game, whereas you're playing and just trying to win and play and have a good time. It's not edutainment. It is just a fun video game. But Bruce Lee is a character and he's chirping in your ear when you make a mistake and he's giving you like real life advice that's dope. And if you listen to it, it will actually make your life better. I don't expect any of those kids to suddenly, oh my gosh, like my life is going to be amazing. But you're planting those same ideas that were implanted in me that ended up having this tremendous effect. And then we like to think that our content is a funnel. So at the top, we're getting you with the entertainment. And then as you get older, we hit you with what people think of as me on YouTube, the show, either the Tom Bilyeu show or Impact Theory. And then the like most condensed part of the funnel is pure education, where it's literally think like this, act like this to get this result.
So you said the game is not edutainment.
It's not, no.
Got it. What's the target demo of the game, would you say? Like ages
11 to 15, okay. Primarily male, though I don't think we're off-putting to girls, but we are aimed at 11 to 15-year-old boys that are hardcore into gaming. So if you think our perfect overlap would be with Fortnite.
Got it. Okay. Something I was thinking about was what you said about kind of getting them when they're younger is I know Shapiro has his own media app. The one specifically for kids that he built. It's like conservative kids media. Have you heard about this?
I knew he had shows for kids. I thought it was in the Daily Wire.
Maybe it is in the Daily Wire or it was something separate. But regardless, like I was curious why you hadn't thought of doing something like that, like some kids show, maybe Cocomelon based, but it kind of instills the values that you're talking about.
So it's not that I haven't thought about it. It's that everything comes down to what works. So the Daily Wire kicks off a lot more cash than Impact Theory. And so he was able to take way bigger risks on doing that kind of entertainment where you could spend hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars on a show that just dies. And so trust me, we think a lot about the Daily Wire and what they're doing. Very impressed. And we are trying to create a similar engine. This is part of the reason we launched the Tom Bilyeu show. Long story, we can certainly go down that road if you want. But the idea there is you have to have a certain amount of capital that's being kicked off that you can afford to lose. So we were trying to do the same thing in comics. Created some really incredible IP, much lower barrier to entry on comics than like an animated show. There's no money in comics, learned that very directly. And now what we're looking at is, can we use AI to start doing that kind of animation? So that's a big part of what I'd say we'll be doing in 26, which is where I skate to where the puck is going to be, where I think AI will be at a point where the IP that we've created, we can now animate ourselves for very low budgets, but very high quality. And then also they skew a little bit younger than we do. So you can get away with a show that maybe it doesn't need to be as crisp to find an audience. And historically, I've resisted going that young, but I do think as we begin to experiment with AI, we're going to have to skew a little bit younger, call it 6 to 8. And we'll see. That'll be a big experimentation for us. So right now, we're trying to find out what's real with AI because it's really not quite there yet, but it is literally getting better by the month.
How much does it cost to build a video game?
Ooh, that's millions of dollars. So we have invested probably in the neighborhood of 10 million over 3 years, maybe a little bit less, 8 million, but something like that. It's a lot, especially if you don't know what you're doing. And in the first 2 years, I was a moron. So we spent probably 35% of what we spent was just education, in that we shouldn't have done it that way. If I had to do it over again, I'd be a lot smarter. So we're far more capital efficient now, but we weren't in the beginning is the honest answer. So.
Got it. I'm kind of curious, how do you like even test an MVP for something like a video game? For instance, with the protein bars, it was like people at the tech company were just consuming them and we're like, we want more of these. So you're like, okay, this works. They'll probably pay for them if she started saying, hey guys, I just need a couple bucks to pay me back. But how do you test that with something as large scale of a video game? Like, do you release a beta version of it? Do you release like a bare bones version?
It's entirely possible what we're doing is a terrible idea, but this is the path that we're walking. We are releasing the game in phases. So we're trying to build this really gigantic game. Basically, on a long enough timeline, in success, we will build Ready Player One. In each step, first you have to do like the avatar creation. So we did the avatar creation, we released it to people and let them come in and build these avatars and wander around in a space, but there's really no game, but we let people do it and they came in, they found the bugs, what they like, what they didn't like. Then we went into the storytelling side. So you can do quests and interact with NPCs. So we released that. So you create your avatar, you could come in, interact with the NPCs, and we would obviously very few people doing it, but you see what people respond to, what they don't. And then the next was we had to build in the combat. So we build our combat system. Now we release that as what we call sweaty party games. So you could come in, they're like mini games really fast, and we would get game guilds. So we now have game guilds that will come in and they'll play, and then we see, do people stick around? Do they actually enjoy this? We built a map builder so that the guilds could build their own maps. They're way more likely to promote something if it's UGC. And we found also, by the way, shout out to my map builders, that these guys are building better maps than what we were able to build by just paying people. It's crazy. So these guys come in, they make maps that they want to flex with their friends or their guild on, and it's been absolutely incredible. And so a big part of our thesis from the beginning was at UGC. So anyway, we're building in phases. So like, I will not let us go on Steam yet because the game right now just is not robust enough. But our next phase is much bigger because we're now putting all of these pieces together. And so probably in the next, call it 2 months, we'll open it up to our diehard fans for a week and let them play it, tear it apart, find the bugs, give us feedback. We'll then go down, heads down again for probably 6 to 8 months. And then we'll go out on Steam with like the full game loop for the first time. So from launch of like, we're now a game company to that first full loop will be about 4 years.
Where do you predict the intersection of cryptocurrency and video games will be?
It's not really cryptocurrency is not how I think about it. So in the beginning, I thought cryptocurrency was going to be a big part of this. And this is going to raise the ire of some people who still believe in that. I think cryptocurrency attracts gamblers. I'm far more interested in collectors. So that's why I'm so into Web3 Rails. Web3 is a technology, and Web3, the easy way to think about it is the blockchain allows you to bring some of the properties of physics into the virtual world. We can debate all day long whether humans should care about things like scarcity, but they do care about things like scarcity, and the blockchain allows you to prove that something is scarce. So that I think is just the future. And if you want to get into Ready Player One, like good and proper, now you're talking about AR. Forget VR for now, set that aside. I don't mean VR when I talk about Ready Player One. I mean the scale of the UGC world. That's really what I'm talking about. But you'll be able to blend the difference between when you're in game and when you're in the real world in ways that are utterly fascinating, that we could do a 3-hour podcast that is just me listing all the things that will happen. It is phenomenal. People, I think, are going to love that future. So we're trying to lay all the groundwork. That's why we build on Web3 rails, so that you can interface with the real world. You can make things scarce. You can blur that line so that when you're in the shopping market, I can actually plant a thing. Let's say we do a partnership with Bruce Lee, and you have to go to, like, Bruce Lee has a physical grave in Seattle, Washington, and you could put a thing physically there that if you go there with your phone and your, I hate saying these letters together, NFT, your digital asset, it knows where you're at, that you have the right to collect the thing that's there that you can then take back into the game. Or we could even do like an AR style game there to have him appear and talk to you or whatever. I mean, just countless ways. This is not a thing that we're doing today, but in terms of what we're trying to build towards, that's the kind of thing that we're building towards. And it's only possible on Web3 rails.
Yeah, you talked about gambling a bit. Do you have issues with gambling?
I think people should be able to do it. I wish them the best. I think it is absolutely terrible. For me, I am a bad gambler. I'm going to lose all my money and I don't get anything out of it. And when you look at the stats, people in the altcoin world, I'm pretty sure this is a literal stat. If it's not literal, it is certainly directionally accurate. 5% of all the wallets collect all the gains. That means 95% of people are losing. Now, hey, people should be able to bet on whatever they want. You can place a bet on how many times, how many steps somebody takes inside of a grocery store if you want. I don't care. Like, I don't mind. People should be able to do what they want with their money. It's their money. I just don't enjoy the energy of people that are gambling. That's not interesting to me. So I'm a collector. So this just comes down to personal taste. So for instance, Trump launching a meme coin. Should he be able to do it? Sure. Do I like that he did it? No.
Yeah, you sold your company for $1 billion, but you think investing is gambling.
Investing is gambling. That one, oh, everyone's going to say, this is my opinion. This is not my opinion. Investing is gambling. I'm happy to walk you through it. It's going to take a minute, but okay. So Tom, defend that investing is gambling. So investing works like this. If you made money off of the fundamentals of a company, then I would say you could still make an argument that it's gambling because the company may end up failing. And so you placed a bet that company was going to do well and it didn't come through. But that's not even what I'm talking about. So if you only invest in dividend paying stocks, cool. I won't round that to gambling. What is gambling, though, is the fact that the value of a stock is not based on the fundamentals of the company. The company could be kicking off all the cash in the universe, and people just decide that stock is not going to be as valuable in the future, and therefore they start selling it off like crazy, and the price of that stock is going to drop. That means what you're really dealing with is sentiment. Now, if I'm dealing with sentiment, what I'm saying when I buy a stock is I think the sentiment will be better down the road than it is today. And I'm willing to place a bet on that. And that's why if you really look at the stock market, there's all kinds of things will round to options trading, where people can bet against a company and make money. How's that anything but gambling? You can actually make money by saying this is going to go down in value. So I love it though. The stock market is a big part of the reason why we have the modern miracle of aggregated capital. I am so glad the stock market exists. I love that we're able to gamble, but it is gambling with a cover story. And the cover story is that, all right, everybody, we're going to let people gamble on this thing, even though we're saying you can't gamble on sports and you can only do this stuff in Vegas. We're going to let you gamble on companies though. Why? Because it allows those companies to aggregate capital. It allows a company to say, hey, if you believe in us, buy some of our company from us in the form of a share. That allows us to build and scale the company. That allows us to innovate and make this country better, bring wealth to the world. Capitalism is exactly how you pull people out of poverty. But let's not lie about the essence of what it is. You're letting people buy a stock that they think they will be able to sell for more later. Period. End of story. Now, if we get into, I love all that, but I hate the fact that the government forces you to gamble. You are in a position right now where you're either going to be stolen from until the end of time and lose all of your purchasing power via something called inflation, or you're going to buy assets. So now this thing that I'm very glad it exists, but I don't like that the average person, the stock market is way too complicated. And so the average person is going to get hit by a Mack truck if they try to trade. Now, if they just get into an index fund, it's less risky. It's still risky. But I think people must own assets. Okay. So this is not a pitch against it. This is me trying to identify what is true. Because once you understand what is true, then you have a mindset that offers you higher predictive validity. That's my whole thing. I'm obsessed with, when I think about it as gambling, is it more or less instructive with how I should act? More. Okay, great. Then I'm going to look at it that way. So inflation is, you can think of it as an invisible tax. You can think of it as theft. I like theft just because it wakes people up. But it is the government saying, we don't have enough money coming in from tax for all the things that we want to pay for. And this, by the way, is how the rich get richer and the poor get poorer. Your government's doing it to you. Not the rich people, the government. And technically it's the Fed, but they work in conjunction. So anyway, I always just round it to the government. But yes, I am well aware that the Fed is not a governmental agency. Anyway, the government is stealing your money, and they do it by saying, we want to spend more money than we're able to take in tax. I don't want to have to convince you, dear taxpayers, to let us tax you more. So what we're going to do is we're going to print money, AKA we're going to counterfeit that money. There is literally no difference between you counterfeiting money in your house and the Fed counterfeiting with entries in a database in the Fed. Now, how does that make the rich get richer and the poor get poorer? It's the way that those funds are actually put into the economic system. And the way that those funds are put into the economic system is the Fed buys debt. So what they do is they say, okay, Treasury, you can print a bunch of Treasury bonds, and which is government debt. But they do this with corporations as well, which is extra crazy. And no matter how many bonds you put into the market, we will buy them if nobody else buys them. So the Fed is literally forced to print more money whenever the government wants to spend more money. So as they print that money, it's like having a cup of coffee and pouring water into it. You are diluting the value of all the dollars. So even though you look at your bank account, you're like, I had $100 in there before they printed the money and I have $100 now. What's the problem, Tom? The problem is, imagine that caffeine is what you're trying to get out of your coffee, and I keep pouring water into it. Now, instead of drinking 1 cup of coffee, you've got to drink 20 cups of coffee to get the same amount of caffeine. So the problem is, you had $100, but now you need some multiplier over that. Maybe you need $1.2 to get the same buying power. Maybe you need more. At 2% compounding interest in 10 years, you're losing, I think it's 10% of your money. So people don't think about how much money they're losing to inflation. Now, 2% is the target. We're not there. Some Trueflation says in the last 5 years, the true inflation rate has been 26.1% or 26.01%, just rounded to 25.
On average, past 5 years?
The compounded.
Compounded, okay.
So in the last 5 years, the average American has lost 25% of their purchasing power. But you look at your account, and you're like, but it's the same amount of money. But that's why people are like, why can't I make ends meet? Why are my kids feeling completely iced out of the economic system? Why can't anybody buy a house? Okay, this is where we have to talk about house prices. Or, Tom, but the stock market's going up. When you look at the stock market compared to inflation, you'll see it's effectively a 1-to-1 ratio, which means what's really happening is as your dollars are devalued, the stock market's just going, well, I just need more dollars for you to get the same thing from me because I know your dollars become devalued. Your dollar's just worth less because there are so many more dollars in the marketplace. Just hold on to the coffee analogy because I know it just seems impossible that more dollars in your bank account doesn't mean you can buy more stuff, but it really doesn't. So people look at that and they say, I'm not able to buy the things that I want to buy. Why not? And the answer is that you don't have something that keeps up with the pace of inflation. So assets keep up with the pace of inflation. So the stock market isn't actually going up in value in the long run. There are fluctuations where people get excited about something and there really is more money going into it. But when you step back over a 10-year or 20-year period, it's just keeping pace with inflation. The same with your house. That this stock is merely, its increase in price reflects the decrease in the value of your dollar. Your house increase in price is merely a reflection of the decrease in the value of the dollar. It's the same as saying it now takes 8 cups of coffee to get one cup of coffee's worth of caffeine. So purchasing power in this analogy is the caffeine. The thing you actually want is purchasing power. It's not dollars. The dollars, much like a cup of coffee, don't really matter. They're variable. What matters is that thing inside of it. And that thing is purchasing power. What does it buy? What can I buy with $1? And so as what you can buy with $1 goes down, it creates the illusion that prices are going up. And so people think, well, I'm getting rich. What's the problem? Problem is twofold. One, you're not getting rich. If they had just not printed the money and that number stayed the same, you at least preserved your wealth, which is really all you've done by owning assets. Now, where I really get mad, where I think that this is a moral violation, is that the stock market is already gambling. People could lose their money regardless of money printing and inflation. And you're forcing the average person who just wants to feed their family and be a good employee and live their life and have fun on the weekends, you're forcing them to understand this insanely complicated game of investing in the stock market. Most of them won't do it, which is why most of them don't do it. And given that everybody, the rich and the poor alike, are all having their money devalued, but when the money goes back into the system and they buy that debt, they're buying it from people that are savvy enough to hold that debt. And the people that are savvy enough to hold that debt are the people that own assets. Literally, when I got wealthy, when I made my money, without any prompting on my behalf, people started calling me. I'm a money manager. I work at Wells Fargo, wherever, and let us help manage your money. And I'm like, cool, I don't know anything about managing money. I know how to make it. I don't know how to manage it. So help me. Jack, lesson number one, Tom, you have to buy assets. You have to buy assets. They beat it into you. You make them explain it. And they're like, this is assets, this is why, yada, yada, yada. Now, because the rich literally get educated, either by their family or when they make money, by a banker who will call you unannounced because they know that you made money because they want to vig off that. So they want to manage your money for some percent back to them. And they're going to teach you, you got to buy assets. Cool. Who's telling that to the average American? Nobody. And even if you tell them, they don't know what that means. And they don't want to spend time trying to figure it out. So this is where Bitcoin now enters the whole mix, because Bitcoin was somebody that looked at that and was like, this is legitimately immoral. This is exactly how every reserve currency has lost its status as reserve currency every time, all throughout human history, because governments cannot stop themselves from printing money and spending more money than they make. And so eventually you devalue the currency so much that it's what's called hyperinflation and it no longer has value. So Bitcoin was like, we're going to make something that is uninflatable, that will never be more than 21 million. And so now you can store your wealth in Bitcoin. And I long for the day where Bitcoin is just boring. It's like gold, doesn't go up much, doesn't go down much. It just is what it is. So that you have a place that you can put your money that just can't be inflated away. It's a safe haven to protect against inflation. That's not where we are today. It's wildly volatile. But that's where I hope it ends up getting.
That's a lot. I have a few things to go off it. Some quick ones. Do you think Satoshi Nakamoto is Jack Dorsey?
It's interesting. You're the second person to say that to me today. My short answer is no.
Got it.
But I don't have any reason to believe one way or the other. Maybe, sure, could be. But
do you think a Trump presidency is filled with less corruption than previous presidencies?
I have to hit my James Burnham button. Okay, so James Burnham wrote a book called The Machiavellians, which was a relook at Machiavelli himself. And he said everybody looks at Machiavelli and says, oh, this guy was like evil and wolves howling in the background. And he said, that's not the right way to think about him. He was a political scientist before there was a name for political science. And he was just trying to understand, what is man like as a political animal? The quest for control, that you will lie and manipulate to maintain control, that you're always trying to expand your control, and that always, and I mean always, there will be an elite class that rules over the masses, always, no matter what. Even in a democracy, it doesn't matter. You will always get the influencers at the top that people are going to listen to, because even if you put an app on everybody's phone and said, hey, just vote on this thing, most people won't do it. They certainly won't educate themselves on that thing. So they'll just go, Jack, just please, I follow you because you think through this stuff. Just tell me, how are all of us in your community? How should we vote? And then they'll just do it because they don't want to think about it. So it is an inevitable fact of the architecture of the human mind that people will follow a small group of elites, period. Okay, so now you have a small group of elites. By definition, there's no escaping it. No matter what style of government you put in, communism races to a small group of elites that hold sway over the masses. So you've got that fact of the world. And man as political animal is going to seek more power. Man as political animal is willing to lie to get that power. And even if they think they're doing it for the right reasons, they're going to do it. So is the Trump government less corrupt? Probably not. Like, humans are just going to human. They're going to do what they're going to do. So the right question is, what are the outcomes that we want? And is Trump more likely to get us to the outcomes? So the great news is that Trump's brand of I want more power is I'm going to put money back in the average American's pocket. Cool. If he pulls that off, we're better. If we're going to call it corruption, we're better with that style of corruption than the other side. But everybody should be skeptical of their government, which they won't be, of course. But you can fall in line with people that are going to saber rattle and say, hey, this guy's leading us off this cliff. This is why nobody should be on a team. You should not be on team blue. You should not be on team red. You should not be on team Biden. You should not be on team Trump. You should be on, I want things to be better in my country for the average person. I want a thriving middle class. If you're the greediest capitalist in the world and you don't understand, you sell things to the middle class. And as they get hollowed out, you get the French Revolution. Guess who gets their heads lopped off? So you never want a situation where you do not have a thriving middle class. So if everybody, this is how I want politics to go. Oh God, these fractals so hard. Okay. Jack, politics should go something like this. We want a politician to say, even though we know they're going to do it to lie, to manipulate, to gain more power, to curry favor, to get elected, we want them to say exactly what their North Star is. Dear Donald Trump, where are you trying to take us? Say it. Write it down so that we can all say, cool, now everything that you do is, I'll believe, good intentions, your best attempt to take us to that North Star. And now I can check everything you're doing. Is it moving us towards that or not? And if it is, I'm like, well, damn, you're doing exactly what you said you were going to do. Cool, I'm here for it. And if it isn't working, I'm going to point out the fact this is not working. And so the good news about Trump is that's what he's doing. He campaigned on a whole bunch of promises. He told you exactly what he's trying to do. And now he's doing his best to pull that off. Now, if you hate his North Star, cool, rail against him. But what you can't say is that he's not moving towards that at lightning speed. And so then it just becomes a question of, are the things that he's doing working, yes or no? Because don't believe what he says. That's man is political animal. James Burnham has made abundantly clear all throughout human history, people lie to maintain power. So just assume he's going to lie to maintain power. Just ask, what's he doing with the power? Because you're not going to replace him with somebody who's not going to lie to maintain power. It's just going to be another person that lies to maintain power. So yeah, figure out what's the North Star, how do we get to it, and then are the things, you have to agree on a metric. What is the metric that we expect this thing to lead to? So right now, this is why they're talking about, hey, Doge is finding all these savings, and we want to give you, dear taxpayer, some of those savings. It's a brilliant bribe. It's a bribe, and it's horrible because it doesn't pay down the debt, which is exactly what you should be doing to put purchasing power back in people's pockets, but it's how you stay in power. So I'm like, yeah, I forgive it. I get it. You're going to have to keep your government in power because the style of leadership that we just had was making us fiscally way worse off. We were racing towards the fiscal cliff way faster than we are right now. So at least that's my read of the situation.
That's interesting. I think another effect of a Trump presidency is the kind of sentiment shift. Kind of what we were talking about with stocks and companies, that people are buying stocks in hopes that it will do well, kind of the same way that a president might not have that much individual impact on someone's life, but the fact that Trump is in office means something, and it means that people can act in a different way than when a liberal president, Joe Biden, was in office. I'm not sure if you've noticed a bit of a shift in how people act. It seems like there's more free speech, especially with X. People are more willing to kind of tear down the left a bit now, as opposed to the Biden presidency, more freedom of speech. But what's interesting about it is I've been kind of predicting just to my friends that we've seen the pendulum swing to the right, and I'm waiting for it to swing back to the left, especially with content. Like a lot of the top podcasters, for instance, I think 8 of the top 10 last year were conservative political commentators. And recently, I think last month, a show passed Joe Rogan in the amount of downloads, and it was a completely liberal news-based show. I was like, okay, well, that's interesting that the pendulum swings back that way. But what I wanted to ask you around this whole thing is, why did you start going into kind of this news-based content with the Tom Bilyeu show, as opposed to just impact theory?
Okay, so that answer is twofold. One, I am driven by a desire to make people's lives better through ideas. And I really think that everybody has a frame of reference. That frame of reference controls every aspect of your life. And that frame of reference is a combination of your biology, your values, and your beliefs. And I'm not going to be able to change your biology, but I can help people adopt values and beliefs that are better. And given how I am and how my brain processes data, I'm all about, I don't know what's going to work. I run something I call the physics of progress, which is basically the scientific method recontextualized for business or for life. You just say, I'm trying to get here. There's an obstacle between where I'm at and where I want to get to, and I'm going to try a thing to see if it leads me there. And if it doesn't, I'm going to figure out why it didn't, come up with a better hypothesis and try again. And you just live in that. So anybody following the Tom Bilyeu show gets to see me do that out loud. So I think that style of exploration of ideas, which I think I am particularly good at, I think is going to help a lot of people. And it certainly helps me to have the community there live, because we do the prep for the show live. So the community's there, sometimes encouraging, sometimes heckling, sometimes telling me I've got a terrible take. And it allows me to really sharpen my own thinking before we actually record the show. So that's a big part of it. And then the other part is, just as a capitalist, I'm looking at my own company and going, okay, when I first launched, I was so different. We zoomed past everybody. I raced to 2 million views. People were like, what is happening? This guy's come out of nowhere. I could get guests anywhere, everywhere, all the time. It was awesome. Great period of my content. And then I got bored to death because people were treating the content like what I call spiritual entertainment. So I was back to that 2%, 98%. It was like, I'm giving all these incredible ideas, and it's just people are coming back to watch the show, but they're not making changes in their lives. If they were making changes in their lives, then I could repeat the same thing over and over and over and be like, I'm doing it for them, and I'm okay with the fact that I'm getting bored. But between repeating myself to death and being bored and people not making changes, that was pretty disheartening. So I told my team, you're either going to lose me as a host, or we're going to start broadening the topics that we cover, because you build a mindset, because that was phase one, was all mindset. You build a mindset for a reason. You point it at a thing that you want to get done. So we started broadening the content. Then 2020 happened, COVID hit, and I'm going to make a very long story extremely short. COVID hits and I realized the world does not work the way that I thought it did. I start going down the financial route to figure out what the hell's going on. That starts being my highest performing content and uncovers that all the things we just talked about. With now that I understand how money works, I'm like, Jesus, it was like having somebody lift the curtain and see the Wizard of Oz. And you're like, whoa, okay, this is not what I thought it was. So that starts taking me down that path. But then I would have an episode do 6 million views and the next would do 36,000. And I'm like, oh, interesting. They're here for the guest. They're not here for me at all. And the problem is, every good guest worth their salt now has their own podcast. Before it was, oh my God, Tom, you've built this incredible platform. This is so amazing. You have TV level production quality. Our promise to people was, I'm going to read your book and I'm going to give you the best interview you've ever had. And that was exactly how we got that explosive growth. But now there used to be 400,000 podcasts when I started. There's now 6 million and growing by the second, Jack. So I was just like, okay, this is a new game. And I've got to understand that being an awesome guest and being your own host means you're not going out to other podcasts. So people start potting up. So you'll see Rogan can birth a star, right? And then those guys just feed each other. It's brilliant. And so I was like, okay, I'm not a good guest on other people's shows because nobody knows how I think. I don't talk about it at all. I'm virtually silent in the first phase of my career. And then as I got deeper, I would talk more, but because people were there for the guests, it was like, why won't this guy shut up? And so I was like, all right, look, I'm just going to set aside whatever weirdness I have about wanting the spotlight on me. And I'm going to say, there's a thing that I'm good at, and I'm going to start doing that now. And at first we debated, like, what should the show be called? Because I was still being weird about just owning this is about me and the way that I interface with the world. And I'm like, we're calling it the Tom Bilyeu Show. It is what it is. Now, I structure it in a way that I think is unique, that I think is way more entertaining, which is that we have multiple people. So we've got Eunice is on Community. We've got Drew as the producer of the show. And Eunice is interfacing with the live community so that we can have a high degree of interaction. And I get Drew that's DJing the show, making sure he's looking at the data, what's working, what's not working, helping me make it better, throwing me alley-oops so that we can talk about things that I've got a particular take on or think are really important. And for me, the energy that it creates, so I'm not just staring into the dead eye of a lens, brings a side of my personality out that I'd never been able to do before. Now, yet to be seen whether this is going to be successful or not, but the shows themselves are growing fast. So it's certainly an encouraging sign, but we'll see. There could be a glass ceiling coming for me that I don't know. But right now, good trajectory. And so those are the 1-2 punch.
What's the downside of doing a podcast where you are not the star? Like, I know in your instance, it's you can't go on other podcasts. It doesn't like build your brand, but like really make it easy for people to understand, like creating content that people don't know them for them and understand their personality and their thoughts and what they believe. Like, why is that so crucial?
I think it comes down more to the specific person. So if you look at somebody like Stephen Bartlett, he's done a phenomenal job of being a traditional interviewer. He's so good at it that he's made a huge brand for himself. Now, he also had things that he was doing with Dragon's Den or whatever it's called, where that gave him notoriety outside of that. So when people saw him as the interview, it was like already, oh, this guy's got credibility behind him. So it's not one way to skin a cat. I'm not saying this is the only way to do it. I just saw with my particular skill set, how people read me as a host, that it wasn't putting me in a position where I was able to get across my own ideas. There's something that's just awkward enough about me with somebody else where I don't have that sort of effortlessness where I can, throw in like little comments here and there where people get a sense of what I'm about. So it, again, was done great. And we've made millions of dollars off of the podcast, and we still do those kind of episodes. So for people that like that better, it's still there for you. And I love doing them. I learned so much, but I could just see, given my skill set, my personality, that there was a missing link. Because the team, I would wrap an episode and the team would be like, bro, off camera, you're so different than you are on camera. You seem so serious. You have an angry, neutral face. Like, who you are off camera is more interesting. And so how do we find a way to get that on camera? And so I started live streaming me playing video games and just got way more comfortable, nonstop, just talking and engaging with the community. It was like, there's something here. And so that's when we decided, I was like, look, I know me, and me by myself is never going to be as dynamic as me with other characters. So like if my wife walks by, I'll bring her into the show and she'll talk to the audience for a while. We heckle, he's not here now, but we have a guy named Eric that's normally doing the live cutting, and you just make everybody a character in the drama. And it's certainly a lot of fun. Ask me again in a year if it's lucrative. I won't jump the shark and say that it's definitely going to work. But going back to the physics of progress, it feels like the right experiment to run to see if we can move forward. And it is the most fun I've ever had making content.
I suspect it'll be very successful in that instance, because I see it as the highest leverage thing for a podcaster to do personally. Just looking at Candace in the content that she's creating, like she's sprinkled in a few interviews now and then, but her content that people really engage with is kind of that similar vein to what you do or Shapiro does with the live shows. So if you enjoy it, then I think it'll definitely crush.
And one thing I'll say, there's a big difference between an audience and a community. And I have been an audience builder until about 6 months ago. And when I started live streaming, I was like, oh, I've used the word community before, but this is a community where you're actually getting to know the players. Like what they are about in their real life. You begin to get a sense of the most active people, like what they care about. You even get a sense of like the community as a totality. They're never going to be in lockstep, but you can feel sort of energy waves moving through them in terms of whether they hate something that I say or they love something that I say. It's like you get a sense of all that. And because we engage with chat so much, you get a live sense of like, you can dry run the episode. Hey guys, I'm going to write the intro. I'm debating what should be the opening question that we go to. Should it be this or this? And then they'll chime in like, oh, that's going to be way more interesting than this. Bro, if you want clicks, it's got to be that. And so you get the wisdom of the crowd as well. And I've never been one where posturing like I'm cool has served me. They're cool people and long may they exist. I'm just not one of them. So me being in the community and listening and saying, like I said this to you before we started rolling. If I say something that you think is dumb, give me a chance to defend my idea. Like, don't think you have to be nice or whatever. Challenge the idea, because either I'm going to show that I've thought about this a lot more deeply and thank you for giving me a chance to clarify, or you're going to help me get smarter. And so either of those for me is a positive outcome.
Yeah, I think I'll have to end the social media part on that vein for now. But I did want to ask a little bit about your relationship because that kind of fascinated me. But you met your wife while teaching film school, right?
Yes.
How did you know your wife was the one?
Okay. So I came home one day. We'd been dating at this point, I don't know, probably 2 months. And she was cleaning my couch. And I was like, whoa. Like, she loves me so much. She wants to make sure that she takes care of me and that she's doing nice things for me. And I was really blown away. Now, come to find out, she just thought I was filthy and my couch was disgusting and she wasn't going to sit on it until it was cleaned. So we've laughed about that endlessly. But I remember in that moment thinking, yo, I've never had somebody like treat me like that. Like, that's incredible. When I knew I was in love with her, it was a lot sort of softer, squishier. There was no like, I mean, I remember the moment where it like finally hit me. It was on my flight back from my first visit to London. But that lightning moment of like, yo, I might marry this girl was the mistaken read on her cleaning the couch.
What is love?
Love is a neurochemical state of a deep reciprocal connection that is evolution's way of bonding people. So it's largely vasopressin and oxytocin. So trust, bonding, security. That's how it starts. And then if you do it right, it becomes sharing a life with somebody. And I think there's deep complexities to the way, and I'm all for people that are in non-hetero relationships. But if you want to know what it's built on the back of, it's evolution going, I've got to bring these two together for sexual reproduction. So any species can clone or sexually reproduce. So when you choose sexual reproduction, there are tremendous risks that come with it, with sexually transmitted diseases. But you get a lot of protections from disease and predators because there's now this opportunity for the blind watchmaker, as Dawkins calls it, to go in and experiment with new things, evolution, right? So you get that diversity. Like, even if you just think of it at an immune system level, if you clone yourself, whatever takes one of you out takes all of you out. And so that lack of diversity creates a real problem. So, all right, I'm evolution. I have this species that I want to sexually reproduce, but as the brain gets bigger and bigger and bigger, I'm also putting the mother in more and more jeopardy. And so to continue to do an intelligence play, a culturally impacted intelligence play, I've got to build a brain that gestates outside of the womb, which means the mother is at high risk during pregnancy, and then the child needs a ton of care outside of the womb. And so I'm going to create this dynamic between the man and the woman to come together as a pair and bond for long periods of time. Now, the size of our testicles will tell you right away that we are not a purely monogamous species, but the size of our testicles also tell you that we're not purely where we don't bond. So we're a middle road between the two. So,
and is that human person specific?
Humans are that, yeah.
Like, some people are more geared toward monogamy. And
No. The species, yes. I mean, as there is more variance in individuals than there is across the species. But when you look at the species as an average, we are prone to pair bonding and also prone to like, oh, I could either end a relationship with that person and move on to the next. It's not like a swan or whatever where your mate dies and you just never mate again. We'll move on, or people have affairs. So we're in the middle. And I would say context dependent will determine whether we're focused on monogamy or whether we're focused on polygamy. So understanding that from an evolutionary perspective is super helpful. So anyway, back to what love is. So nature has this need to get these two to work together to make sure that the kid survives long enough to have kids. So that's the game from an evolutionary standpoint. So bonding is a way to ensure that the woman, when the child is vulnerable and she needs to take care of it, has another person that will go out and acquire resources and protect against things. And so it felt like coming together that I was now complete in a way that, oh, there's somebody that sees things that I don't, that views the world through a totally different lens and is pushing me to be a better version of myself and compliments me in ways, isn't like me, but compliments me. And that, all of those things, and then all the poetry stuff of it all. I don't want to make this sound too clinical. Love is just awesome and it's beautiful. And I have literally written poems about it. But I definitely look at it through the lens of evolution, which has helped me navigate my marriage well.
How do you maintain love without having children?
Wow, that's interesting. The two are two totally unrelated phenomena to me. So that goes like this. So if love is this fascinating coming together of, I need the immediacy of the neurochemistry to bring you to bond you, to make you want to have sex and then stick around long enough to go through all the hardships of having a child and all of that, then I'm going to make sure that I make this intensely enjoyable, that you're going to get some obvious immediate benefit out of this. In fact, the greatest description I've ever heard of how do you know when you're in love came from my mom, who said, you know you're in love when you feel about your significant other in a way that's so strong, you think to yourself, there's no way two humans have ever felt this strongly for each other ever before. And I was like, oh my God, that is exactly what it feels like. So that's the neurochemistry side of what brings you together. Now, what keeps you together is all the psychology of nature wanted to make sure it was intensely valuable to share a life with a partner. And so if you're smart and you leverage other elements of the way that the brain works, which the easiest one is you get whatever you reinforce. So if you repeat over and over and over, I love my wife, she's amazing, this is great, oh, I love this, she's making me a better person, she's pushing me to think harder, this is incredible, compliment instead of criticize, like just, wow, like sharing this life with her is so incredible. You will feel that. So your brain will hardwire for that emotion. And so when Lisa and I got together, we just said, look, I know this drill. This cocaine-like feeling that we have is going to wear off, and this is going to mature into a different kind of love. It's going to be a pair bond. And so for us, building together companies has been one of the great joys of our life. It pushes us together, I'm sure in a similar way that raising a child pushes you together. But I also think that kids are very, very difficult. And so having kids, which is probably the single greatest gift that you can give to humanity. So thank you to anybody and everybody that can hear my voice for your service if you have kids. But ultimately sharing a life together, doing hard things together, that's going to bond you, whether it's a kid or not. And I think kids raise the stakes a lot and can fracture a lot of relationships. And so people really have to be on point to navigate that well. But again, it is a gift to humanity. And so for people that do it, I really think it is extraordinary. I just don't think it's easy.
Yeah, not to get too personal here, but
get as personal as you want.
Does it cross your mind frequently at this point? Like, wish we would have had kids? Yeah.
I've never had the thought that I wish we had kids outside of the following truth. I really want kids. I just want to not have kids a little bit more. So even now, we could still use a surrogate. We could certainly adopt. And so we've asked ourselves, I think it is very important to constantly face the hardest decisions in your life and say, hey, are we still making the right decision? So we look at that with frequency. I wouldn't say it's like the thing that's at the top of our minds, but we ask ourselves, do we want to keep building businesses? We ask ourselves, should we have kids? And so far, every time we've asked, should we keep building businesses? The answer is yes. And should we have kids? The answer is no. But yeah, if that ever changed and that flips in my brain, then we would either adopt or weep endlessly because it was too late, which is a very real thing. And we talk about that. So I am firmly convinced on my deathbed, I will regret not having children. That just seems obvious to me. But I'm not going to live my life for the perspective that I will only have at the end of my life. So that also doesn't make sense to me. But I'm keenly aware that we move through phases. And when you're in that phase, it's the only thing that matters.
I guess it's the question of like frame of the veteran. which will I regret more, not building X number of businesses or having like biological children? Would you say you lean more toward I'll regret having those businesses?
I don't think of it that way. Building the business isn't about having the business. It's not about succeeding in the business. It is about fulfillment. So I think we are all hardwired. The one thing you can't escape, parent, not parent, doesn't matter. The only thing that matters is fulfillment. And fulfillment has a knowable set of ingredients. You're going to work really hard. That's an ingredient. You're going to work really hard to gain a set of skills that allow you to make progress, not achieve, make progress towards a goal that matters to you for whatever reason and is honorable. If you do those things, you will feel good about your life. Whether you're a monk and not only do you not have kids, you don't have a significant other, or whether you're somebody like me who builds businesses and let's say they all fail, doesn't matter. If you were thinking about the progress, you have the number one ingredient to happiness, which is progress. So that I think is the right way to think about it. Now, if the question is, why should people have kids? There, I think you can make a pretty profound argument for population growth is a good thing, and therefore we need somebody to do it. So that one I get. Like if somebody wanted to attack me, it would be on the moral vector of is not having kids moral? That's a fair question. I think it is. I think people should have freedom of choice and be able to choose what they want. But if you were asking me to steel man the argument, I would say that raising a child well is such a profound gift to humanity. It should at a minimum be celebrated. But I think everybody needs to be able to live the life that they find most fulfilling.
Yeah, I can imagine having a relationship with your wife for this period of time, building businesses together at such scale. And she has her own content as well as you. Like I saw in the other room out there, you both had YouTube gold plaques, which I've never seen a husband and wife have that before. You've had like some pretty honest conversations and critiques of each other. Should you tell your wife if she's getting fat?
Of course. You don't say it like that. But yes, if you... Jordan Peterson had that great rule, never let your kids do anything that makes you dislike them. Don't let your significant other do things that makes you unattracted to them. I think that is a very difficult conversation. You need to be very respectful. You need to lead with love and remember this is somebody you're building a life with, that this is an autonomous person that has their own desires and dreams. And so you don't want to be in a position where you're forcing your will upon them or being cruel. Like you have to create that space for them to be who they want to be. But at the same time, if they're doing something that you think is unattractive, there are ways to get them there that are loving and uplifting. My wife has been very encouraging. Whenever I start putting on more muscles, I get a lot of rewards and attention. And so that's made sure that I've never gotten heavy again. I used to be 60 pounds heavier, that I maintain enough muscle mass. I'm sure she wouldn't cry if I put more on. And yeah, so if she were getting to a position that I found that there would, I mean, look, if she got injured or something and there was no way for her to escape it, then I would find a way to fall in love with it. I've talked about if she got horribly burned, what would I do? Whole thesis there. But if it's something that she can do something about, and it's making me feel some kind of way, yes, I'm going to bring it up. I'm certainly not going to pretend that it's not a real thing. Now, I might say something like, I don't have any right to ask this of you, but I want to be honest that when you were working out more, I found it more attractive. Like that's just sexier to me. Again, when you say it, how you say it, all of these things matter a lot. And if I channel people in the comments, I get that they're not going to like that, but you cannot be in a relationship if you can't say what's true. I will tell my wife anything that's true. And if it's true, she's going to know about it. I would expect the same. Now, this is coming from somebody who's like, if my wife became morbidly obese because she got depressed or whatever, I'm not going to leave her. I'm running the experiment of what does it look like to share a life with somebody. So yeah, it is what it is. And because my wife knows that, like actually feels it, then you can have harder conversations than somebody who's routinely a dick to their significant other, constantly undermines their self-esteem. But I don't do that. I'm constantly helping my wife become better, letting her know how much I love and respect and appreciate her and all the incredible contributions she's made to who I've become. And so because internally, she has a very deep sense of worth around me. I make her feel better about herself when she's with me than when she's not. Then you can say what are difficult things, but I'm not fooling myself. That'd be a very difficult conversation and you'd have to handle it incredibly well.
So you believe in unconditional love?
No.
What conditions?
Out of curiosity, what did I just say? Because I said I wouldn't get divorced.
You said you wouldn't leave your wife if there was an instance that she became morbidly obese. And you kind of maybe implied that if there was like a burn situation that you would stick with her.
Yes. But if my wife were cruel to me, if my wife were unfaithful, then I get a divorce. So it's certainly not unconditional love. We have a set of rules in the relationship, and as long as those are intact, and we don't have a rule that says you need to be at peak physical attractiveness at all times. That's not a thing. She's going to turn into a bag of wrinkles and bones. Like I expect her fully to be in her 90s one day, and all we'll have to go on is you look good for your age.
Yeah.
But the reality is that physical attractiveness wanes. And so I'm not in this for that. Now I enjoy it. And I'm glad that my wife has stayed in incredible shape. And so I thank her for that, but it isn't unconditional.
What do red pill men get wrong about relationships?
They think that the worst of behavior that can be manifested by a woman is universal or innate. And it's not. So we are the creature that learns from culture. So if somebody has a frame of reference that all men are bad or they're to be taken advantage of or disposed of or whatever that makes them so angry, then they're going to have a real hard time and they're going to paint it across all women. If instead they look at themselves and women as evolutionary creatures that are wildly influenced by the culture, then it's like, okay, cool. I get what's happening. In a culture where you can just swipe, it creates this sense of just on to the next. And so, okay, meeting somebody online may not be my strengths because let's say I'm not good looking enough to look good in a photo and then just stats about my wealth. Cool. Then I'm going to sidestep that and I'm going to go meet somebody in person. But if you want a killer partner, you've got to be a killer partner. So it's like they are so upset about some of the realities about what culture has done to the dating scene that they forget that they can control their lives. Nobody is coming to save them. Figure out how the game works. And remember, the point of the game is not to get laid. That's part of it. But the point of the game is to have a meaningful relationship with somebody that's going to make you a better person. And to share your life with somebody, it's way better. Love is the greatest thing that life has to offer you. Full stop, period, end of story. But when I say love, I mean it's requited. It is a two-way street. So if I see, this has created this toxic relationship, I'm going to find somebody in the real world that has a frame of reference that at a minimum is malleable so that I'm not going to go and fight against the people with the dumbest stance that all men are dumb or whatever. All men are toxic or anything like that. I'm going to find somebody that's like, oh, okay, this person seems reasonable. And I'm now able to, over time, add value, get them to be attracted to me and fully play the game, by the way, as I was the one that showed up with flowers and custom written poetry on the first date, which does not get you laid. And boy, did I think it was going to. So I get it. Like there's a real game. You have to package yourself in order to earn that time to show somebody that you are a person worthy of being attracted to, worthy of a relationship. But I don't waste any time arguing with reality. So if I were single again and saying, okay, these are the traumas that are being created by today's culture. How am I going to work my way around them? I'm going to catalog the things that I'm good at. So I'm highly verbal. And I'm going to leverage that to my advantage. So I know I've got to put myself in a position where I get to speak. It's not a mistake that I was teaching at a school for adults, but my wife, to be, was watching me speak on a subject that we were both passionate about. It's not a mistake that that's the woman that fell in love with me because she saw me at my best. And also, I'm not going to rail against hypergamy. Hypergamy is true. Women date across or up. So is it surprising that a student would fall for a teacher? No. So you've got a student in a class, the thing she's most passionate about in the world. Her teacher, his best skill set is that he's highly verbal. He's also good at filmmaking. So now it's like this thing you're passionate about, you're the student, he's the teacher, power dynamic, which people can get mad at it, but that's just the reality. That's the nature of hypergamy. So she's looking at me and it's like, ooh, and hey, this guy is kind of interesting, seeing me at my best in a thing that we're both passionate about. That opened the door. Now from there, I had to be somebody that made her feel good about herself. I had to be somebody that was legitimately interesting. I had to be somebody that was deeply interested in her. I had to be somebody that was like, yo, you are the most interesting woman I've ever met, and mean it. And so you start putting all of those things together and it's like, okay, you've got something to build on. But in a world where that's a lot harder because of the cell phone, whatever, again, I'm not going to waste time fighting against it. It is true. So now, given that, what's the strat?
Growing up living paycheck to paycheck in a family kind of struggling with obesity and alcoholism, what promise did you make to yourself?
Okay, so one, I should tease this out. So in my immediate family, there was no alcohol abuse. Shout out to mom and dad who did not drink. God bless you. My larger extended family put on a freak show for me so that my parents who didn't drink were like, see, this is how people act when they do drink. So I was afraid of alcohol for a very long time, afraid of drugs, full stop. And I never had to worry about where my food was coming from. I used to think I grew up poor. I did not grow up poor. I have now seen poverty up close. And I didn't grow up that way. But what I did promise myself was, A, I'm not going to do drugs because people act like morons. Which I do drink occasionally now as I've matured and had a realization that I can control myself. But the big thing for me was I couldn't always have the things that I wanted. And in my family, you had to work. So from the time I was 12, I've had a summer job. And my parents wouldn't buy me a Nintendo for 4 years. I kept thinking every birthday, every Christmas, I'm going to get it, I'm going to get it, I'm going to get it. And then at 12, my mom was finally like, if you want a Nintendo, you are going to have to get a job and buy it yourself. And so I took a job in a door factory. And so doing all of that stuff for $2.10 an hour, by the way. And all of that taught me that not having money made me very angry, and that getting money I could control. And that when you had money, you could get the things that you wanted. And so I became obsessed that I was going to be rich. And literally from the time I was a little kid, I'm going to be rich. I'm going to be rich. I'm going to be rich. And everybody laughed at me. They thought it was hilarious. But I grew up in the 80s, man. And in the 80s, it was like, yeah, you can be rich, of course. So not everybody went and pursued it, but I believed all the movies and was just like, oh, I can do this. So the promise was no one's ever going to control what I do ever again. So I'm going to go make money. I'm going to live the life I want to live. Nobody's going to tell me I have to do chores or anything like that. But it really came from like a childish anger. Like I wish I could go back and just be like, dude, stop worrying about what you can and can't buy. Stop complaining that your parents are making you learn the value of hard work. This is all a game of skill acquisition. Stop being a wuss. Get a job so you can get good at something that matters so that, yes, you can make money, so that you can learn faster than the next person, so you can outcompete them, and you're going to be able to control your life one day. But it's going to be through skill acquisition. Because when I was a kid, I was whiny and complainy, and my journey was don't feel sorry for yourself. Stop arguing with reality. The world works in a certain way. You can master it. You can gain a set of skills, and you can get so good at something that even if people hate you, they can't stop you from doing it.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy seeing where you came from to where you are. It's the classic story, but I think, just a quick interjection, do you think a lot of people make their story seem worse than it was? Like a lot of wealthy people?
I think everybody mythologizes their story. So there's no way for me to walk you through all of the realities of me as a kid. So did I grow up middle class or lower middle class? Probably lower middle class. Did it really matter? No. Was I ever without food? No. Were there days that I was actually drinking pickle juice? Yes, because it was the only thing in the house. But it was like, mom was going to come home and we were going to have dinner. You know what I mean? So it's like, I can tell you the pickle juice story and make it sound like I was having pickle juice all the time, or be honest that it was just that one day and I knew that my parents were going to come home. I was going to get fed. I can focus on the time where my dad was working a blue collar job, but for like 80% of my youth, he had a white collar job. So it was like, my parents didn't have a lot of money, and that did bum me out in that there were things that I wanted that I couldn't have. But the real thing is, what is the frame of reference that you build? And I think a lot of times as people just make their story expressible so that they can tell you, they're going to focus on those really cool beats, right? Like my neighbors had cows. So now you have an instant picture of how I grew up. But when I was like, 14, they paved the road. So it's like, do I focus you on that? Or do I focus you on, until I was 14, I lived on a dirt road and my neighbors had most of my neighbors had farm animals. So it's like, they're all true, but also when I went to school, it felt super normal. You know what I mean? So it's like, the reality is that you have to simplify. When you simplify, you're going to simplify to the coolest stuff that makes for good TV. It is what it is. So I always try to remind people that, look, to explain it, I have to mythologize it a bit. The right way to think about me is that I grew up somewhere teetering between middle class and lower middle class. I was lazy as hell. And my journey has been one of getting tougher, overcoming laziness, and leveraging the legitimate childish anger that I had over having to buy my own Nintendo, and that absolute refusal to let somebody else control me with money led me to make the decisions that I've made. But that's all mythology. It's so much more complicated than that.
I really like how you put that. And I've noticed the more successful I've become, the more I've started kind of downplaying how bad I grew up. You know, it's like, yeah, I don't really feel like saying this. Like, it wasn't that bad. Like, you kind of develop more empathy as you get more successful because there's no reason to blame anything. Kind of take accountability in your past in that way. But a thing I wanted to ask you about, and I know a lot of people, this is a big headline for you. So this house we're in is fairly nice. The article I'd read said you bought the most expensive house in Hollywood. Is that true?
Yeah, it probably is true. Yeah. Maybe there was one more expensive. It's close.
Yeah, I went through ChatGPT. How much was this house at the time of buying?
God, my wife is not going to like me answering that question. I will say if you Google it, the number comes up real fast.
Yeah, I tried to ChatGPT, like go through and see like where it was ranked in the world. And it's maybe like top 30, 40 public sales in the world.
Oh, no way. There's got to be houses
you think
way
so?
more. Oh, for sure. Like, this is one, here's my favorite story that reminds you, God, this is terrible who this person is now. But on the day that we moved into this house, I went to P. Diddy's 50th birthday party. I was only there until like 10 o'clock, everybody, slow down. And we walked into the foyer of his house, and he had a painting on the wall that cost almost as much as this house. And so I was like, bro, I'm still broke. This is crazy. So there's levels to this shit. So is the house expensive? Yes, the house is expensive. Are there people with a lot more expensive houses in the world? For sure. There's no way. I don't even know if this house is going to be in the top 1%. So, I mean, maybe, look, I have not done the math, but there are places that are like north of 100 million. So, and I've been in a house that was, I don't know what it sold for, but it was originally on the market for 250 million. I never felt more poor in my life. It was awesome. When I see people with better things than me, I just find it super inspiring. But it was incredible. The staff quarters were unbelievable. Like, unbelievable. One of their walls was this sculpted wood that made it wood. One single piece of wood, and it looked like a drop of water rippling out. Oh my God, it was so cool. That was the staff quarters. Yeah. So anyway, the house is lovely. Definitely something I aspired to. Couldn't love it anymore, but yeah, there are much nicer houses in the world.
Yeah, I hate to perseverate on this a little bit, but you said you went to a Diddy party.
Yeah, that used to be cool.
How do you? Yeah, it's so 2020 and below. But how did Diddy have enough money to spend that much on a painting?
Okay. Well, so I don't know a whole lot about how much money was kicked off of Ciroc, but I assume it's all from Ciroc. His involvement with the parent company of that brand, he had equity in that. Is that true? I have no idea. I've never met him. His vodka.
Okay, gotcha.
So I never met P. Diddy. We were trying to do a comic book with him, which thank God did not happen. And so we knew, my wife, I should say, knew somebody that knew him. And she was like, oh my God, he's having his 50th birthday party. I can get you guys an invite. And so we gave him this big drawing that we did for him, that my wife did for him. No, that's a lie. I forget who did the piece of art. Anyway, we blew this big thing up. My wife is a very talented artist, but we did this comic book piece of art. We're like, hey, we want to do something with you. We've done something with Steve Aoki, and we want to do a comic book with you. She gave him the piece of art. We never heard anything back from him. Didn't meet him at his birthday. And was, again, just like this hilariously humble moment of just when I thought I'd made it, here I am in somebody's house where their art costs as much as my entire house. But yeah, I think it's all from Ciroc, but I don't know that.
Yeah, that makes sense. Hopefully it's from that, not some deeper conspiracy.
Jesus, well, that all seems as dark as it gets.
But yeah, wanted to ask you, I mean, the reason I think the house is so fascinating, I was thinking about it from my perspective of someone that wanted to go into film and then realized maybe it's easier to just make money and then make my own films. I think it's kind of cool that you have the most expensive or one of the more expensive houses in Hollywood, you know, when you didn't do it through movies. It's like every producer that lives here, it's just kind of a cool flex. Something I noticed.
It's funny. I never thought of it like that, but yeah.
Yeah, it's like I have the nicest house in Hollywood. I didn't even have to make a movie.
Yeah, but I so want to create that kind of art. Yeah. If I had to do it over again, I would go straight into film.
Really?
Yeah, because I didn't realize that was going to be the last 20 years of that art existing as I knew it. Like, it's so different now. I'm literally, so right now, literally as we speak, I have a team at the Berlin Film Festival trying to raise funds for our animated film. And I'm just like, if they come back with a no, I almost don't care, because 18 months from now, I'll be able to AI that film into existence. So it's crazy. Like, we're living in an extraordinary time. But as just an unbelievable film junkie, that I spent, because I just assumed it was forever. And I lost that 20 years where I could have been making relationships in the film industry. I just didn't know the things that I needed to learn from business. And so do I regret it? No. But if I were doing it over now, knowing what I know now, you can put me in any industry and I'm going to take it over. Period. Full stop. End of story. Except for maybe physics. I don't have the mind for that. But the things that I'm good at, if you drop me in, man, I know now how to climb the ladder. I know how to make something work. And so, yeah, if I had to do it over again, I would just start straight right into the thing.
How will AI change the way we create and consume content?
It's going to change literally everything. So the way that AI will work in the short term is very simple. All the things that you want to do, but they're very expensive to do, they're now effectively going to be free. You're going to have to get good at the thing. You still have to have taste. Like, I tried to get it to write the screenplay for the animated film I'm talking about called Mary Mods. I was trying to get it to write the screenplay. Not good enough for that yet. But outlining it and being my co-writer was so good. It was shocking. Shocking. I didn't, but I actually considered, do I just close the company and now just go all in on this, where I am writing it with AI, I am directing it with AI. I'm creating everything just with AI. Like, you're probably no more than 3 years out from that's a real thing. And some of the most talented artists that I know, and I mean, these guys are talented, they're now leaning into AI. And so these are guys that can actually do it themselves. One guy, his name's Maciej Kusiera, is a Polish artist, lived here in America for a long time, worked on Marvel movies. I mean, just the biggest of the big of the big. Unbelievably talented. They named a building after him in the movie Ghost in the Shell, the live action one, because he was so instrumental in the concept art. That's the level this guy's on. And he's now just doing AI. He's like, dude, it's so much faster. Because there's a Studio Ghibli film that has a 4-second shot that took an animator a year to create. Now, I get it. There are some people that are like, but bro, the artistry, like, that's what I love about it. And I'm just like, hey, great, you go do you. But to be able to output that shot in 4 seconds is game changing. Now it's about the story. Now it's not about like how much you're willing to suffer for your art. It's like, how incredible of a story can you create? And since now I'm obsessed with video games are so hard, so expensive, so slow, that with AI, we're already able to go, give me a character that looks like this, make it a 3D model, auto rig it, texture it, drop it into the game. We can do that in like 3 hours. That used to take us, rigging alone with somebody who's been doing it like for a decade, is 3 weeks. 3 weeks just to rig. That's crazy. Now, if you don't know what rigging is, it's dead simple. And I kept telling people, AI is going to do this. I guarantee this. Everything about rigging makes me angry. And now, of course, yeah, AI rigs it. Boom, just like that. So that is so transformative. That's over the last 3 years. So when I started, the most expensive part of the video game was just creating all the art assets, creating the 3D models, the character designs, all that. Guess what you can do basically instantaneously? Character design, 3D modeling, rigging. Now, it still has a little way to go to give you like an actual game ready asset, meaning that it's optimized enough, but we are using the output of the AI in the game. Just for main characters, probably not quite there, but the fact that 4 months ago, it was only like deep background. Now it's like proper enemies we're making like that. And only the main characters of the game do we do like by hand.
How can the average person prepare for the way AI is going to change media?
Learn how to do it right now today, as soon as this episode is over, but not before. Rush out and start using AI. Don't watch videos on it. Start using it. Figure out what is the thing that you want to do. So if you're an accountant, figure out how it's going to matter inside of a spreadsheet. If you're a programmer, start learning, okay, how as a programmer do I use this? Because I'm telling you right now, I'm not looking to fire people. I'm looking to find the people that know how to use AI, because when I use it, I'm like, oh my God, this is magnifying my efforts. For sure, it's 4xing my efficiency. It might be more. And so I'm looking for other people that are like, okay, this is the state of the art. This is how far we can get right now. And if they're on it today, I know they're going to be on it again in a week and a week after that. And what I find with my own team is that they'll look at it once 6 months ago and be like, bro, it doesn't work. And I'm like, yeah, 6 months ago, this is improving at a rate of 300% per year. So every month, it's getting some ridiculous amount better. And so if you're not checking in constantly and really getting into the weeds of it, like actually trying to get an output, because if you do it just like surface and you give it a terrible prompt and you don't know how to use the tools, it will give you garbage back. But if you really know how to use it, oh my God, it's incredible. So you prepare by engaging. Engage.
Why are you not building in AI?
I would build in AI if I could. So everything that we can build in AI, we are. I don't want to build an AI tool, if that's what you're saying, because I don't want to be Unreal Engine. I want to be Rockstar Games. I want to be Riot. I want to make the thing. Like, remember, I only got into business so that I could tell my own stories. So I want to make the game. I want to have a community that's playing the game. I want to send Easter eggs and messages and tell character arcs. Like, that's what gets me going. So I don't want to figure out the AI. I'm so glad that people are doing it. And Lord knows, every time Elon posts about his AI game company, I'm like, please make this available to other people, because boy, oh boy, do I want to use it. Shout out to Epic Games for all the tools that they've created. All of us game designers are standing on the shoulders of those giants. I am beside myself with gratitude, but I want to tell story. I want to positively impact the lives of 11 to 15-year-olds through entertainment.
You've interviewed hundreds of people, you'd say at this point. Peterson, Hormozy, Goggins. What's your favorite question to ask someone?
I don't have a default question. It is always, what am I trying to learn from this person? And what is something that nobody's asked them before? But the honest answer is, so I'll map out the episode. These are the things that I think we really need to hit. But then I'm just steering by, they say a thing, and then I try to pursue that to its end. I'm trying to build a functioning worldview that has high predictive validity. So it is going to be a series of questions like, take Ray Dalio, most successful hedge fund manager of the world. The most important question that I asked him is America likely to be in civil war in the next 3 to 5 years? Like, I can think of no more important question to ask that guy, because that's what he pays attention to. But David Goggins is going to be a totally different question. That's going to be, okay, how do you get yourself to stare in the accountability mirror, right? That's like the how you get yourself to take that step is going to be the most useful thing you could walk away from that interview with. So each person's going to have something different, but I'm always looking for what's the thing I can utilize in my own life.
Who's the most impressive person you've ever met?
On what dimension?
The one I like to think of this as is, who can do the thing that I think I'm the best at better than myself?
That I've interviewed.
Maybe interviewed, maybe encountered, had conversations with.
There is a skill that I lack that Michael Strahan so embodies that I am in awe of him in the way that he moves through the world. For people that don't know him, he's a Hall of Fame football player for the New York Giants and also a Good Morning America personality. And 99 times out of 100, when I meet a famous person, I'm like, oh, normal. Meeting Michael, I'm like, oh, I get why you're famous. He is the warmest, kindest, most charming. He just makes you feel good. Being around him is just awesome. And I'm like, how are you doing this? Because he's just being himself. But God, dude, it is an effortlessness that I wish I had. I wouldn't even know how to articulate it or put it into words, but I absolutely cherish every moment I get to spend with that guy. He's just extraordinary. And it's partly because I'm so bad at that my own employees literally yesterday were like, you like hugs? And I'm like, bro, I love hugs the most. But for whatever reason, Drew was saying, he was like, with you, it feels like there's a line. And I'm like, yeah, I don't know how to make that go away. I don't know how to make whatever that thing is that makes me feel standoffish. I don't know. I don't know what it is. Strahan doesn't have that. Like oh God, you just want to be around him. And because I know my life would be so much better if I could be good at networking, like even just being selfish, just a little bit of effortlessness would go such a long way. So anyway, I can't say enough nice things about that guy. And if I could steal that superpower, Michael, I would take it from you in a heartbeat. It's so good. Oh, but I don't have it. So
why do you suspect he has it?
We are 50% hardwired. And you just have a thing. Some people are born, I have high verbal ability. Yay, I love it. I'm so grateful. I don't have to think about the words, they just come to me. And every now and then I will thank my subconscious because I didn't do anything to earn that I get a disproportionate reward out of practicing that, because I have spent an inordinate amount of time practicing it. But it was very clear to me, even when I was young, I'm better at this than most people. He just has that thing, man. I don't know. I have a feeling he was like that as a kid, and it wasn't like he was standoffish and nobody liked him. I just think he has a freakish ability to disarm, to make people feel seen. He knows how to appropriately cross the physical barrier where he can give you a bear hug and you're just like, word, dude, in a way that I don't. I'm like, I'm going to get sued for this. So I have that little bit of standoffishness. Yeah. I have no better words other than to say people that have that ability because of my skill set, I'm always in awe.
Last question. What's the best piece of advice you've ever received?
Booze don't block dunks. Now I read it, so it wasn't given directly to me, but that's important. Meaning, you can get so good at something, even if people hate you. They can't stop you. It's a Kobe Bryant quote. And that is life affirming. It's life changing. Love that one.
Well, everyone, this has been the Jack Neel Podcast. This is your guest, Tom Bilyeu. Where can people find you?
At Tom Bilyeu on YouTube.
Awesome. Thanks for coming on, man.
Thanks for having me.
Appreciate it.